Pop, persuadable. What's going on, boo-boos? I love yo. You're mad good looking. Today, we are going to talk about the Gamekeeper adjustment. If y'all don't know who Gamekeeper is, he's the character that uses his horn for foreplay. Oh, that was so bad. I shouldn't have said that. But I fucking did, and so we're going to move on. It was a lot of adjustments that happened to Gamekeeper. You know, for a long time, we waited for an adjustment for Gamekeeper. When I met the developer of Identity V, the creator, it was one of the questions that I asked him back in Koa 2. We got that adjustment. It kind of fell short. Did make him better at the time. And now we have a massive fucking overhaul of the entire character. And I think that it's really good that the devs are doing this because it shows that they're still paying attention to those old school hunters, which I can appreciate that. That's kind of their version of showing, hey, we're still paying attention to these old school hunters instead of saying, hey, let's leave them. Anyways, let's talk about the first adjustment, and that's going to be suffocation. All right, so suffocation, I'm not talking about the one where we see on all of the Cornhub websites because everybody wants to be choked these days because apparently vanilla no longer tastes good for anyone. It's going to be a shit show of a video. Suffocation has decreased the vaulting speed in a certain radius by 20%. Now, the big thing here is that when he used to use his hook, you would be decreased in movement speed by 20%. It's been it's been adjusted to an extent down to 13%, but it can stack 13 times. So 4-play horn Spider-Man looking motherfucker can actually slow you down tremendously, especially late game, when all of those hooks are still there and coming faster momentum. I think this makes him extremely dangerous. I think that this is going to really slow survivors down, especially with the vaulting. This is also supposed to reduce the risk of that tight kite-in, which we're going to get into later. For now, we're just going to talk about the adjustments, and then we're going to go into more of the analysis of his overall composition. Traps is the next best thing. So excited for this to be in the game. All right, traps are as deceiving as a dude who has loyalty tattooed on his forearm. Traps is similar to the fake pregnancy test of Identity V. That is what this is for. Essentially, you can have up to 8. Somebody is in prison for up to 8 seconds, and you can disarm them. If they are in the trap, they get highlighted for 5 seconds. And yeah, really. Also, you cannot put these within 20 meters of a rocket chair. It used to be 12, but on the test server, they're like, fuck that. And they increased it to 20 meters. We're going to talk a little bit more about the traps and how I think they're going to be used a little bit later. Also, the adjusted tier 0 ability of pretty much using your chain. We already know you can be fucking Spider-Man and vault towards an object, but more so, you're going to have 2 hooks, which is really fucking awesome for you, but bad for the survivor, right? It's kind of like getting somebody pregnant that you hook up. Not only did you get them pregnant, but now you're having twins. There's 2 of those motherfuckers. Next, adjusted tier 2 ability. This is the bukkake of hooks. Hooks are going to be fucking coming everywhere. Loads are going to be coming everywhere. You're going to feel overwhelmed. Essentially, you can just keep fucking throwing these damn things, and it's just going to keep slowing down survivors. You can read what this is. Bane can now cast Chain Hook again with restrictions. First 2 recasts can be used within 8 seconds, and subsequent recasts can be within 3 seconds, all right? So really, he's going to have a lot of mobility.
Oh my god, Persuade, this seems so unfair. He's so imbalanced.
Hey, what's going on, little Timmy?
Nothing, it's just this seems so overwhelming.
Oh my god, why can't I be in this fucking video, huh? You chowder head Joey Bag of Donuts. Jim, leave for a second. Timmy, I'm going to talk to you a little bit later, little man. All right, my bad for them coming in the YouTube video. So, what we are seeing with an adjustment as well with Gamekeeper, they're going to reduce the chain hooks hitbox. It's going to require them a little bit more skill. All right, so location is everything. You'll learn that after prom night, I promise you. Now, they're also going to reduce the risk, or the time rather, that it takes to prepare the chain hook. There you go. It's pretty much like a glorified fluffer. Don't Google that. And they increase the chain hook speed as appropriate, which is a good thing. Now, one of the things that they also did is they reduced the time it takes for the Gamekeeper to be pulled towards an obstacle. All right. They decrease the backswing duration when the chain hook hits an obstacle and when the chain hook misses a target after landing. So there's a lot of good stuff in here for Gamekeeper. The big thing to remember though is that auto calibration is no longer there. It's definitely going to require a lot more skill in order to hit those hooks. And I do feel like Gamekeepers will adjust with that right now. It's going to require a little bit more time. This guy is pretty much like the deer version of Scorpion from fucking Mortal Kombat, but with time, get over here, he'll get it down. And the last thing, now this used to be kind of annoying. You know, kind of like that parent that has a child that does nothing but brag about their child's accomplishments when you run into them. And it's like, listen, Mary, do you have nothing fucking positive about your own life? Stop living in your child's shadow. Anyways, this is when, for tier 1 to tier 2, there's this awkward thing where you could hook somebody and then you get that tier 2 ability. Then you can hook them again and follow up with a hit. It used to require a lot of patience and time in order to get correctly. And Spider used to do the same thing with her web shot. Still think she can do it. So now they're getting rid of that ability. So you can no longer do that where you hook, you unlock the second ability, and then you can hook again and follow up with a regular attack and they're instant dead. So that used to be a really good strategy with Gamekeeper depending on the situation and how much persona points you'd build up, which could get fucked if you went against Perfumer sometimes because you'd get too much persona points. But point is that he's getting a lot in return for this, so we'll have to see the long-term ramifications. We did it. Now we can try to discuss this complicated matter like trying to educate a young adult male about what a female orgasm actually is, right? I know, mind-blowing. No one knows what the fuck it is. So let's talk about Gamekeeper. Neither do I. Can somebody email me? I'm still trying to figure that stuff out. Okay, so with that being said, with Gamekeeper, I think one of the things people are underlooking is the Volton debuff. All right, so we know that the hook, when you hit an object and slow the survivor down, it's been reduced to 20% to 13%. However, I think what a lot of people are underlooking at is that Volton debuff. That is severe, ladies and gentlemen. To survivors who already have Volton debuffs, this is going to be harder for the mind's eye. This is going to be more difficult for the mechanic. It's going to be more difficult for any of the survivors that actually have deficits to their Volton debuffs already. So the fact that that's going to now increase to another 20% in a certain vicinity to a Gamekeeper slows you down, doesn't mean you can get to where you need to go, and that can also increase the chances of Gamekeeper getting those hooks and setting themselves up for position. All right. Think of Arms Factory and Shaq and hitting the pallet down. You hop that window. You try to go to middle. Yeah, good luck with that now. It's going to be a little bit more difficult. All right. Now, I think one of the more interesting things is Gamekeeper's traps. I think this is super interesting. And the reason being so is that I've already seen gameplay where a Gamekeeper will get a survivor in a good, deep rocket chair. Think of Sacred Heart Hospital by the forest area. And what the Gamekeeper can do is they can set traps down where all of the escape options are and pretty much make it so the survivor only has one option to go. So sure, you can't do it within 12 meters, but you can really put traps down and those traps will stay there for the entire game until you put 8 traps down. Now, that's a very important point because think of like Shaq area on Sacred Heart Hospital. You put a trap down by Shaq door after taking a pallet down because of not too many people loop there. But the whole point is that when you have somebody in a rocket chair, if somebody's not tinnitus hugging and they're not on you directly, it gives you a lot of time to venture out and put traps in key areas, especially for late game. So that's where a lot of people were confused when Gamekeeper first came out. It was very confusing because we're like, well, what are the traps going to be used for? You're not just going to run around the fucking map and put traps down. That's a Dead by Daylight strategy. This is a whole different game. It's a lot faster. It's a lot quicker. All right. And so now we're really starting to see some of these strategies fruition where it's like, all right, you get them on a really good rocket chair and no one's tinnitus hugging, especially if nobody goes in for a rescue right away because you down them. That gives you a lot of time to set some pretty solid traps. The other thing as well is the whole fact that he's really going to be able to put traps down to prevent the tight kiting. Now on small maps, that's still not going to be that great because there's a lot of objects and easy transitions. But on big maps, that is more severe. So what I like about Gamekeeper is that in a weird way, he can really put some solid traps down in those like kite-in routes, especially when he puts somebody on a chair, and really just cut off a lot of routes, and those traps are going to stay there in case somebody uses that popular route later on. I think the mobility aspect to him is a big improvement, especially when he hits tier 2. Ultimately, I think Gamekeeper is going to excel on some maps and not be as good on other maps. But I don't know if that's true, because how he uses the traps are going to be really important with his build and how he uses them. The big thing too is the traps that can come in handy when you place them on that rocket chair. Like I said, not on the rocket chair, it's got to be within 20 meters. If you put a trap down near a rocket chair and then put somebody on the rocket chair, that trap disappears. But I do think that based on how he uses his traps, based on engaging with these survivors, I think that it could also snowball for the late game kites. I think his highest potential would be A tier. I don't think he's going to be an S tier hunter. But during a time where a lot of these pro teams are trying to find a really good 3rd, 4th, 5th round option, I think that he might have a shot depending on the map. I mean, that's what we're seeing with Ann right now in Professional League. And I made that video a long time ago. Even in my hunter tier list when she was tier C, I said, listen, I don't really know how comfortable I feel with this, because at the end of the day, she is still primarily a TIE hunter, which has its purposes on certain maps, especially in tournament gameplay. But that's a different video. The thing with Gamekeeper is, how would he do in tournament gameplay going against meta survivors where most people are using wildling and forward? And the thing is that at the end of the day, Gamekeeper does counter wildling. One hook, a wildling is off his bore. That hasn't been nerfed from my understanding, and that's incredibly powerful. Especially all the teams who are trying to capitalize on wildling. You pretty much counter a wildling. But I do think that he's going to be map dependent. I could be wrong on that, but I think he's much scarier now. I know that some gamekeepers prefer the old version of him, but really, I mean, going against a gamekeeper on certain maps, now having traps where you can completely shut off routes, I think he's just going to be much better now. I think his highest potential would be A tier, and even then I could be wrong. Yeah, I mean, that's what happens. Really, in reality, we need to give him time. Because the auto calibration, it is going to be harder for him to hit hooks, but there's a lot of benefits to that, such as how fast the windup is, and going to an object, and him. I mean, there were a lot of buffs in there too in regards to the chain and how fast it goes. So again, the whole point against a gamekeeper was the tight kiting, and now he has something to force you to transition. And that can be very difficult to deal with. And you might say, well, what about going against the best survivors? Well, the thing is that historically I've been inaccurate by only focusing on the best survivors, the best of the best. What's going to happen in the top tournament gameplay? Because 99% of this fucking game is not that. Especially on Southeast Asia, especially on China, especially in Korea, especially here in NAEU. A lot of people like to play their fucking characters even in Legendary Rank mode. Even if they're not an S tier or an A tier survivor, people play for different reasons. The majority of them like to play their characters, regardless of their tier. They like to just play them and do as well as they can. And those are the characters that Gamekeeper is going to do very well against. If you put him against a meta team, including the typical, the seer, the mechanic, all of that stuff, it's still going to be difficult. I'm not necessarily saying that he's going to be an S tier hunter. But I do think that we need to give him a lot of time. I think he's going to be one of those hunters that is going to require a lot of time. His anti-rescue is going to be really dependent on how he uses those traps. I do know that, people who dedicate themselves to Gamekeeper, they're going to spend a lot of time looking at which rocket chairs give them a lot more versatility using the traps. I mean, this is a whole different gameplay now. It's no longer just choosing a rocket chair that's closest to you. It's all about providing pressure and putting traps and slowing the game down. He's got 8 of them. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts putting traps, in very unique situations. But really, if you don't take the traps down, which most people are probably not going to do, depending on where they are, you can really suffer late game consequences. Think of Sacred Heart Hospital again, putting some of those traps by the pallets, by the door, the exit gate, out of Birdcage. If you have somebody in a rocket chair near Forest and you go over there and you set up a whole bunch of traps and then late game you teleport over there, any survivor who's over there will literally have no escape route unless they took time to take the traps down. Most of the time, people don't have time to do that. So I do think that, rocket chair, where people are, how he's going to use his traps, how he's going to preserve his traps. I think there's a lot there, including basement strategies. It's just going to be very interesting to see that. And I think he's going to be scary. I think he's at least going to be scarier. But one or two things can happen at this point. Either the Gamekeepers are going to get better. Excuse me, I just burped. That was gross, but I don't feel like restarting this audio. So, if I have to deal with it, you have to deal with it. I've been drinking a lot of tea today. Anyways, 2 things are going to happen. Or 3. Either the Gamekeepers are going to get better, the survivors are going to get better at countering him, or it's going to be a roller coaster and one is going to benefit at the end. That's usually how these sorts of things go. And that can take time. And I really urge people to be very careful writing him off as too powerful or disregarding him too quick. And the other thing too is that with Gamekeeper, again, there's going to be certain maps that he may excel on, certain maps that he doesn't. At Sacred Heart Hospital could really depend. There's a lot that you can usually transition to. You'd have to be careful about being in the hospital aspect of it. I mean, that's going to be hell. But still, you could put traps down, depending on how you do it. People who are really familiar with circling inside a hospital, you go up there, you put a trap down, you drop down, they try to circle up, they're screwed. I mean, there's just so much. That's my analysis video. I want you guys to tell me what you think about it. What you think about him. I don't think he's going to replace the Bonbon or the Sculptors. I don't think he's going to replace the Dream Witch. But I do think that they really did a good job at trying to prevent that tight cut, other than just trying to hook through objects. They gave him a little bit more creativity. I'm very excited to see how he grows as a character, and I want you all to let me know what your opinions are.